Hey, good morning, everyone. Doing a quick little stream here. If someone shows up, awesome. If not, that's cool. My comments last night, there was a question asked about the point I was trying to make with the car. And the two different times of 2:47 and 2:54 a.m., the 7 minutes that Ann Taylor said is a big deal. And I'm going to explain it to you as best as I understand it. And if there's someone in the that actually comes across this and can correct me or show me where I'm wrong, I would love it. Not as a challenge, but as I just like to have the facts. So at 2:47 a.m., as I understand it, the PCA says that Brian Kohlberger turned off his phone. Okay. From that point forward, they start using camera surveillance that shows a white vehicle, suspect vehicle 1, traveling towards Moscow, Idaho. The truth is, as Bill Thompson clarified, didn't clarify, but as he snuck into his fucking little speech, that phone didn't get turned off until 2:54 a.m. This is supposition, but what I envision happened here is this. Brian's phone stopped reporting to a network at 2:47 a.m. That was then used as a starting point for a vehicle in movement. It went off their network, but they then started looking at cameras. And that's where they claim these cameras identified suspect vehicle 1, consistent with Brian Kohlberger's car, was picked up on camera footage traveling towards Moscow. That's the statements, that's the information given to us by the state of Idaho, the police, whoever. The fact is, and they knew this, was that Brian's phone didn't get turned off. It continued, and it continued to move in a different direction than the car that they identified by using the 2:47 timestamp. So Brian's car continued in a different direction and went into an area where there are no cameras to track it. That's the point. The car that they say is suspect vehicle 1 that's involved in the crime is based on a series of events that aren't accurate. They're a blatant lie. His phone did not get turned off at 2:47. And when you first start seeing a white suspect vehicle traveling towards Moscow, that is not Brian Kohlberger. Brian Kohlberger is in fact going north. He's not heading down Route 270 or whatever road they claim he took. So the 2:47 timestamp and the 2:54 timestamp are, I guess, a little bit confusing, but really not confusing. If you really, it seems simple. Maybe I'm just making it complicated. The 2:47 and then the video footage consistent with the vehicle from 2:47 was shown on cameras. And so they then put that in the PCA. I don't doubt that they knew that Brian Kohlberger's phone was still on until 2:54, going in a different direction. As a matter of fact, Cy Ray confirms that they knew that, but they never went back and corrected their warrant. Cy also suggests that even if they used the correct time, even when Brian went into an area that couldn't be tracked by cameras, he still could have got himself over to Moscow. According to him, down dirt roads or some shit, whatever he was saying. But here's I think the major point is that the PCA, the reason to arrest Brian, and the circumstantial evidence used is a lie. It's not even circumstantial evidence. And that's the issue with the times. That's why the 7 minutes matter. You're picking up a vehicle on cameras heading towards Moscow. That in my opinion is the 11 to 13 that they actually started looking for in the beginning, and then later expanded to 16, from 11 to 16. But the agent himself said he's more confident with the 11 to 13 identification. And this matters in a big way because they identified the movement of a vehicle that they claimed to be involved in this crime that did not belong to Brian Kohlberger. And they never changed that. And when they tell you that suspect vehicle 1 went around that house 3 times, well, It could have went around the house 30 times based on their actual statements and their observations and the bullshit idea that these cameras are picking up Brian, are picking up a different car. So if in fact the car around the house is the car that they picked up on camera after the so-called 2:47 a.m. phone termination, then they're tracking the wrong car. It can't be Brian. Brian's car and his phone continued to move north and never went down that area road, that stretch of road that they claim suspect vehicle 1 went down. That's the problem. Where am I? I don't even know if anybody joined in here. Oops, hang on. Oops. Yeah, that fucking guy's a freak. What's going on there, Peach Babe? I'm just trying to, sometimes I confuse myself. You know what I mean? I don't know, but someone asked a good question. Why does the time matter? And the time really matters because the phone is what they're using for the direction of travel. At 2:47 a.m. when that phone was then claimed to have been turned off, which I suspect wasn't turned off. I suspect it was Brian, but the phone disconnected from the tower that they had gotten information from, and he continued in a different direction. And then at 2:54 a.m. he literally physically turned his phone off at that point in time. You guys remember what Brett Payne said? Yeah, it's my experience that criminals will turn their phone off to match their location. Okay. And so from the jump, suspect vehicle 1 could not be Brian Koberger, making everything else that they argue a ridiculous fucking story of nothing. If the car moving around the house is consistent with suspect vehicle 1, and suspect vehicle 1 is consistent with the movements of a car that turned its phone off at 2:47 a.m., then you just solved your own case. Brian is no longer the perpetrator in this crime. And that's what I've said the whole time this case has gone on. Every fucking thing these people did is exculpatory. Everything is exculpatory for the accused. Hey, Jewel, I hope it makes sense. There's 2 cars in this crime. As far as the way the police department set this up. The car with no phone signal at 2:47 a.m. went towards Moscow on Route 270. That's the car they catch on camera. That's suspect vehicle 1. But that suspect vehicle 1 can't be Brian Koberger because his phone maintained connection to a network and traveled north for 7 minutes, completely eliminating him from Route 270. Therefore, any images that they obtained on Route 270 are not Brian Koberger. It, in fact, in my opinion, is the 11 to 13 Hyundai Elantra. That's what I suspect the truth is. And I suspect they knew that. As a matter of fact, Cy Ray suggested that they did know that. That's just crazy. They never corrected it. Cy Ray also said that if they'd have used the actual route that he took based on the phone information, they still could have made the accusation he was involved. It doesn't exclude the capacity of Brian to get to that house just because he went in a different direction from the Tiptoe Apartments. Right? And that's just shocking. That's just shocking to me that you guys literally are basing the suspect vehicle 1 off movements of a car that would be consistent with Brian's car because he shut his phone off. You're using that as a starting point. His phone went off, and the movement of that vehicle crossed in front of cameras along this route, and that's suspect vehicle 1. Fucking idiots. When they knew that that's not accurate, that there were no images of suspect vehicle 1. Because suspect vehicle 1, who they claim to be Brian Koberger, was going in a different fucking direction. This always bothered me from way, way, way back in the beginning. And even Cy Ray said, you can apply for a warrant, get an authorized warrant. You can go back to the court and then amend it and correct it. And the warrant may be terminated, or the warrant may not be affected at all whatsoever. I didn't know they could do that, but it would make sense that police officials have that. Of course I slept, Twiz. I sleep like a fucking newborn baby. I got no stress, no problems, no nothing, man. How could I not sleep? Man, I have great dreams too. Oh man. Anyway, thanks for asking there, Twizzle Stick. Yeah. Twiz, tell me where am I mistaken in my understanding of the movements of the vehicles that they're claiming are part of this crime? Mr. Twiz? And here, you're on here, you were up later than me. You're asking me if I slept. Jesus Christ. You had to have been up for as late as I am or later. Anyway, that's what I wanted to clarify. And it was who's me going to StreamYard? It was JK. You gave me your real name somewhere up there, but anyway, but that asked that question in the stream, and I know it's kind of confusing. And it's the most confusing part about it is why would law enforcement do that? Okay, Jewel, sorry, I'm bad with names. I mean, it's disturbing to me that law enforcement would do that. And I think also this has something to do with Judge Hippler reminding that woman that they can't use the third tower. I could be wrong on that too, but when they had the hearing and he said, if you're going to bring up that third tower, then we're going to have a Franks hearing. So I think the confusion isn't really confusing. It's pretty straightforward. They claim that at this particular point in time, in this particular place, that phone was turned off. Subsequent surveillance that they then conducted on business and local videos picked up a vehicle that they call suspect vehicle 1, traveling down, I think, Route 270 towards Moscow. That's their whole plot, but that plot is completely false. And if, in fact, you want to go and argue their plot is true, well, Brian Kohlberger continued on in a different direction for 7 minutes. So whatever car you fucking identified going towards Moscow can't be Brian. That still doesn't mean Brian didn't do it. But it's a big deal when it comes to how they organize their data and submit for a warrant. And their warrant's a blatant lie. And I think they did that intentionally, and I'll say this, because they had images. That narrative supports the application for a warrant. The idea that Brian Kohlberger left his apartment and turned his phone off at 2:54 a.m. and we have no idea where he went after that is not going to get you a warrant. Um, 204? What do you mean 204? See, I don't think they were tracking Brian Kohlberger's car. I'm not going to argue that it wasn't him and that he's innocent, but I am going to say that I suspect the vehicle that they're tracking, that they're attributing belongs to Brian, is not Brian Kohlberger's car, that it more likely is the 11 to 13 Elantra. I'm not going to even discount that they tracked an Elantra, but I'm going to go with the original point, which the FBI said was an 11 to 13. And let me just be very clear. It was only later on in the fucking bullshit that they extended that to 11 to 16. So you have the police lying in an application for a warrant about the identification of a vehicle. You have them submitting or proposing they have camera footage of said vehicle. And this vehicle, and they've said this, is consistent with suspect vehicle 1 is consistent with the car Brian Kohlberger owns. They get the warrant with that story, and that story is false. I said that in the very beginning too. I said that's exactly what I would have done. I would have drove another car that's exactly like mine with a discrepancy of a couple of years and go over and commit that crime. And it would make everybody lose their head. They would know. Then they would search my car, and my car would be completely clean. And that seems like that really happened. So, Twiz, I said that right in the beginning before I ever had my own stream. I was on Dago's channel. There's 1,000 ways Kohlberger could have done this. And pardon me. I don't know if you guys could hear that in the background, but I got my Alexa that tells me every day at noon a reminder to scratch my balls. Oh, man, I hate that device. I get that device to say some of the stupidest things just because it's the stupidest device I've ever owned. Yes, that's exactly right. I wish I could have said it and thought that clearly about it. Exactly. Exactly. I think it's Julie, and I got to go back. Oh, yeah, Julie. Exactly that. So the images they take off of Route 270. The image that they took, that they create this direction of travel of suspect vehicle 1 could listen, that in fact could be suspect vehicle 1. That car could in fact be involved in the crime. So let's even go there. That vehicle that they picked up on Route 270 heading towards Moscow, that very car that they claim they track in many locations on video, may in fact be the car that drove around that property, that parked in back and went inside and killed people. That in fact could be 100% true. However, it's 100% not Brian Koberger's car. That's the fucked up part here. So in other words, I mean, this is the best part about the stupidity of this is they attribute the vehicle to belong to Brian Koberger, but they have no proof that it's Brian Koberger. In their own investigation, based on their own statements in the applications for the PCA, show you it's not Brian. That's the most fucked up thing I've ever seen. So let's go back, and I'll go back on some of the things I've said in the past. There was a Hyundai Elantra involved in this crime. It was white, and it did circle that property, and it did come out of Indian Hills Drive, and it did do everything they claim it did. No, he doesn't have to explain that, Twiz. You don't have to explain that. You don't know how the court works. That's not what a defendant needs to do. I have no idea how they got there. And then you look at the investigation with the IGG, and you explain to the people what that does. I mean, the IGG folks doesn't just give you one name. Doing what they did gave them a parade of names. So the DNA is a problem. The DNA is questionable. The DNA also, the chain of custody they did so many things wrong, Twiz, that you don't have to explain shit. The DNA on that knife blade, right, that sheet that showed up 3 days after the crime, a knife sheet that's described to have seemingly been found on a floor by a report written long after the guy actually was in the house, ends up on a bed. No, that should be excluded from evidence completely. That sheet should never, ever, ever make it into a court of law. And I don't even care if the court of law is Cuba. That knife sheet has no business being a part or attached to this case. Well, he's only filing an appeal. He's got to get the approval from Hitler, right? He's got to go back. So we're at the point where he's notifying the court that he intends to file an appeal on miscarriage of justice or whatever the hell it is. So right now we're at the very beginning stages. There's hundreds of things this kid can argue in court. And I think Judge Hitler just made the completely wrong thing, and he can argue Ann Taylor did not put the arguments together in a way that would have benefited him, that she lacked the skills to make arguments in front of a court on a quadruple homicide. There's a lot of things he can actually go after in this case. She should never have applied to move this case. Think about that. Why did she move this case so early on in the process? No, I think there's just a horrific amount of things that could have been slightly different. And I just don't know that she was qualified to do it. I think the most egregious thing is the discovery process. I think the discovery process not only denied Brian Koberger his constitutional protections, but it also helped trap this kid off into a jail cell and break him down until he pled guilty. I think it was coercion. I think that the discovery was used to coerce this guy, to break this kid down. Yeah, most of the evidence, because the evidence is based on falsehoods that they could have corrected, falsehoods that he says they were aware of. And it doesn't even matter if you're aware of it. If you take the movement of the car and you're like, oh, oops, yeah, my bad. Well, then the entire arrest is predicated on false information. and the arrest has to be thrown out. Doesn't mean you still can't go after Brian Kohlberger. That's the fucked up thing here. I think the problem is that if this kid gets through the appeals and they find out that the information used was false, misleading, intentionally or otherwise, then the case is going to be dismissed. I don't think they're going to get another crack at this kid. If an appellate court says that the information used or whatever and insufficient, I don't know how this works out. And if they do get another crack at the kid, well, they did go back and fix the cell data. Bill Thompson tried to do that in the sentencing deal where he made that statement of 2:54 a.m. He tried, but to me, Bill Thompson acknowledging that the information used in the warrant was inaccurate by 7 minutes, acknowledging that inaccuracy at the sentencing hearing is going to be his downfall. They never corrected that with the courts, and any of the documents and any of the charges that were filed and any of the warrants that were subsequently issued on false information. And any of the information they collected, I don't think could be used at a separate trial. He's got a bite at the apple. They may also have a bite of the apple, but it really depends on what the appellate court decides. Because I think you're looking at a case where so much of the circumstantial evidence that was assembled is going to be inadmissible, including the DNA. They can find out where he was at 4:48 today, and they are choosing not to. I don't know about that, but they chose not to do the right thing through this whole process. They hyper-focused on somebody that had a white Hyundai Elantra that came from out of town that was in movement that night, right? Well, he did and he didn't. That's to be seen, right? All right, here's the problem with the DNA. The location of the knife sheath, the mentioning of the knife sheath, and the movement of the knife sheath are all fucked up. They're all fucked up. We have two different statements of where the knife sheath was found. That's point one. We don't know about the knife sheath or where it was from the 13th to the 16th. There's no chain of custody. There's nowhere to explain where that knife sheath just ends up in a report. The initial statement was that it was found on the floor, but the images from the crime scene showed that the knife sheath tucked underneath the victim's, partially under the victim's leg. The problem with that location, or any location for that knife sheath, was there were hardly, if any, blood spatter, and there was blood splatter all over the place, but not on the knife sheath. There was other male DNA on the knife sheath and blood that was never tested. Now, the knife sheath, in the process of getting tested, was sent to the state lab, and the state lab wouldn't accept it to do any testing because there was no chain of custody for the knife sheath. So, in any case, but criminal case like this, anybody that touches a piece of evidence has to sign a document, the reason, and the results, and when it was returned. So, if I went to pick up the knife sheath at 1 o'clock in the afternoon because I'm going to deliver it to the lab, I need to put that on the chain of custody sheet. Anybody and everybody that touches or comes in contact with any piece of evidence, there has to be a chain of custody so that you know it's clean. Nobody interfered between you and that piece of evidence. And that did not exist. The lab said that. The state then, in the same handwriting, one single person went down and wrote a chain of custody with the names of different people and different times that they touched it. And that just can't be accepted. That's wrong. You can't do that. I can't write down, even if I'm the secretary, it doesn't matter who I am, I can't write down the 6 names of the people that touched and moved that piece of evidence. They have to do it themselves with a signature. And that was never done. So you've got all of that chaos with the knife before you even get to testing the knife sheath. The knife, not the knife, but the knife sheath, right? No, I'm not sure that none of this would have came out. I think all of this would have came out in court. But I was on a different topic. I wanted to say that the late document dump is also a huge problem. The discovery is a big problem. It would have come out at trial. It would have, yeah. It would have. Going this way may have been a way to get rid of his attorney. I don't know. He's saying he was coerced. And hey, what's going on there? I don't suspect that. I don't really know what his accusations for being coerced are, but I think if you look at the way the case was handled by the prosecution, and here's the other thing. This is a big deal, just so you know, folks. Just imagine if you're Ann Taylor and you're arguing to get the knife sheath out of evidence. You file a motion and you argue that knife sheath should not be presented to a jury because of the issues with the DNA. But you don't know, and this is a big deal, but you don't know there's more issues than just DNA. There's more issues than how the IgG was performed. There's more issues than how the IgG was brought into companies that don't allow law enforcement to use them. Those problems are individual in and of themselves. However, what you don't know when you're arguing to exclude this piece of evidence is that there's no proper chain of custody. That one lab denied even touching the knife because there was no chain of custody. You don't know that until a week before the trial. So let's now go back in time. She did argue to exclude this knife sheath. She did argue to exclude the DNA, and she was denied these motions. Two important facts. One, Hippler didn't have the data either, nor did Ann fucking Taylor until a week before the plea deal. It was just dropped in their lap. Listen to what Turvey tells you. There's so much more fucked up with this case than just the obvious. How can I argue about disqualifying a piece of evidence when all the evidence information hasn't been provided to me? There's a lot in this case, folks. And this is what I said in the very beginning. And I'm sorry to say it, but I hope this kid did it and he gets set free. Americans need to pay more fucking attention to what's going on in their communities and their courts. You know, and their politics. I don't care if you don't like hearing about politics or not. Get out of my stream. We need to be more responsible, more attentive to our own fucking communities. That's the catch-22. But that knife sheath is a big deal. That knife sheath is the entire case. The entire case hinges on this DNA. That is a problem in any case of transfer DNA, Jacqueline. Transfer DNA, any case in transfer DNA where they find other people's blood at the crime scene that's unresolved as to who it is. But they know it isn't the perpetrator you're accusing. I'm sorry. You got problems. You don't got Brian Koberger's blood, saliva, hair. You got transfer DNA, which is dead skin cells that we shed every day. 5,000 skin cells per second are falling off your body. Everywhere you go, you're leaving your DNA. Transfer DNA is a fucking nightmare as far as trying to use that. It's not like a fingerprint. It isn't like a photograph. Transfer DNA is some fucked up shit because your DNA ends up everywhere you go. And so that in and of itself should not be admissible as direct evidence. That means that at some point in time, Brian Koberger was around someone who possessed that knife sheath. Brian Koberger interacted with that knife sheath at some time, somewhere. But in no way, shape, or form does it show Brian Koberger's presence at the home at the night of the murder. See, some of these things have been disclosed to us after all of this happened. We only know about the chain of custody problems with the knife sheath because of an expert, Dr. Turvey, that came forward because he was hired to examine the evidence. He's the one that found the hair in Ethan's bedroom, not on the bedroom, on the bed rail and in his hand. Hair that was between the victims upstairs. None of this hair belonged to Brian Koberger. That was found but never disclosed. We never knew about that until just months ago. Turvey also disclosed to us the problem with the knife sheath. And he showed photographs to prove his points. It wasn't like he was making this up. He literally showed photographs of the chain of custody and what a bogus chain of custody looks like. And if there were ever a bogus chain of custody, it's the one attached to Koberger's case. Doesn't mean that's how it happened. Well, you can't show me a chain of custody list written in the same handwriting for all people that claim to have had contact with that knife. That's not a chain of custody. That's a fabricated chain of custody. Its accuracy at that point is not even relevant, because the person that touched the evidence didn't sign for the evidence in their own hand. It's not to say they could, if they had any fucking brain, they would have made a chain of custody and put the dates and times on there that were consistent with what really happened by the person that really did it, right? And did not know until the last week of this, from what I suspect he said. No, he didn't know about the hairs. He didn't know about the chain of custody. There's a bunch of things I suspect Brian Kohlberger didn't know, but I think these things are also because the discovery was delayed for so long and the prosecution kept jerking everybody off. We've given them everything they've asked for. That's not your fucking requirement. Your requirement is to give them everything they asked for and anything that could be exculpatory to the client. Basically, every piece of fucking information that you picked up to make this accusation belongs in the defense's hands. Whether it's good for you or bad for you is not the point. And so I don't see how that if once this hits the federal jurisdiction, which I think it will, I don't think there's any way to stop it now. Then I think you're going to find so much of this evidence should never have been allowed into the court. But let me just say, and I'm not trying to protect Hitler, because I don't like Hitler. I did in the very beginning. He seemed very fair. But then he started going down these fucking roads and siding with the prosecution on everything. But now let's put that in perspective. If full discovery hadn't been released and Anne was making arguments on items that discovery wasn't complete about, she couldn't make a complete argument to exclude. She had, so that's a big deal. Well, I don't know that he basically said that, but even if he did say that, basically that's his opinion. That guy should not be trying criminal cases at all. He shouldn't be a judge, in my opinion. You're a judge. Your job is your main concern as a judge is to make sure that there's no government overreach, crossing the line, the boundaries written in that Constitution for government. That's the best thing about Americans. Everybody thinks their rights you're given. It's not your right. That's a brick wall the government shall not cross. Under these conditions, you can govern us. That's what that is. That's not, you got the right to carry a gun. That's not what it is at all. We're going to carry fucking guns and you're going to protect it or you can't be our government. That's what that is, right? Search and seizure, religion, speech, all of that isn't your right. Those are things the government must protect and not infringe upon. It's rules for the government, for thee, not we, you see? And that's the fucked up thing. So many Americans think, I got a constitutional right. No, you don't, motherfucker. You were born here. Being born here is being born free. And everything that you're seeing in that Constitution is what traditional governments have done to their people. They don't respect their right to religion. They don't respect their right to own a firearm. Look around the globe, bro. Nobody else has the shit we have. Why? Because our Constitution limits our government, so our government can't prevent us from these things. That's what that Constitution's about. It's not about you getting a right. And that's funny that so many Americans don't understand the significance in that. That's so 180-degree opposite of what it means to be given a right. In England, you can apply and possibly get a permit for a fucking fox hunting rifle. But otherwise, you can't have a gun. You see, same thing in all over the country, Japan, everywhere, right? Because they don't have a constitution that tells their government what the government can and cannot do, what the government will protect, and what the government will leave alone. That document is limits on government. It is not. It is absolutely not a list of your fucking rights. Your freedom was granted for the fucking from God. And if you don't believe in God, that freedom isn't. You're entitled to that freedom because you're simply a human being born into a free land. I think Hitler was biased too, but I also want to point out, folks, based on some of the information we have now, his decisions may have been based on what was available for arguments. And if Anne had only 80% of the information about the knife sheath, if Ann only had 70% about witness testimonies or crime scene evaluations and conclusions, if all discovery hadn't been provided to the defense in a timely manner, then you can absolutely see her losing arguments and motions to get rid of some of this evidence that was mishandled. She had no evidence of that when she made the argument. The DNA, because it's attached to the knife sheath, you don't even going to argue about IgG. There's no need to make that argument. You make the argument on the knife sheath based on the chain of custody, the lack thereof, the discrepancies in the police reports and the pictures. That's your argument. And you could actually get 2 bites at the apple on that. Then you can make, if you have to, you make an individual argument against the DNA. But that knife sheath should have been excluded. But that, again, that information didn't come until like a week before trial. Everything that was going to be included in that trial had already been argued in motions, had already been ruled upon. So, yeah, she would have had a lot of closed room hearings, and will both attorneys please approach the bench? That would have happened a lot in that trial. It would have been a continuous fucking rain and parade of that, especially once the experts had gone through things more thoroughly. So let's see, hide current comment. What do we got? No, I don't mind who watches me. I do this. I like fucking difficult things or mind-bending things. I really only think after I can hear myself what I'm thinking. I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe it sounds stupid, and it could be stupid, but that's how my brain works. I have to hear it. I have to vocalize it. And then I have to just mash it around. Yeah, somebody asked me that question in the chat room or in my comment section. I just don't know. The threat may be, if you don't do this, there's no way we can win. You're gonna get the death penalty. I don't think she said do it or I'm gonna beat you or kill you. I don't think any threat like that. But listen, let me just say, I'll give you an example. I went through a process in a civil / criminal. The civil that was then alleged to be criminal. Okay. And what ended up happening was every lawyer I went to told me you need to take a plea. I go, what do you mean I need to take a plea? I didn't violate this law. Yeah, but you know, you got past criminal convictions. You're going to get convicted. I said, I don't even understand how you can say that. Because the law, the enforceability of the law is dependent upon my direct actions. And those actions would then be in violation of the law. But I didn't do, and there's proof, I never took those direct actions. It doesn't matter, he said. I said, okay, fuck that. Go to another lawyer. They all told me the same thing. Take a plea. Well, fuck you. I became my own lawyer. And I went to a law library that a real estate lawyer had access to because he rented an office space in this big local law firm that had their own fucking law library. And I went in and I reviewed the law and then case law attached to this law. And my case law agreed, the case law of people not being convicted said what I'm saying, that my actions had to have been direct, that it had to have been intentional. And they weren't. And therefore, you can't convict me of this crime. Matter of fact, you shouldn't even have fucking charged me with this crime. I went to court with this real estate lawyer on this criminal charge and destroyed the prosecution. Literally destroyed them. They had to dismiss the case. The court did. And I wanted to dismiss with prejudice, and the judge laughed. He goes, I don't know why. And he said, you're his lawyer? The guy goes, yeah. He goes, I don't even think he needed you here. He goes, well, if you notice, Your Honor, I didn't say a word. He did all the talking. And he said to me, he said, sir, you yourself, have you ever thought about being a lawyer? I said, hell no. I don't want to be a lawyer. He said, you might be successful if you were. But that's the point I'm trying to tell you is not to boast or how smart I am, but that the fact that the laws are the laws. And the convictability of anybody on a criminal charge is outlined in the law, and they have to show that you, to the exclusion of everyone else, did this. Period. End of story. And in this case, they couldn't do that. They didn't do that. They actually manipulated and lied in an attempt to do that, and kept this fucking guy locked up, withheld their discovery. The whole idea you're going to get a firing squad. The whole media got involved. Everybody after Brian Kohlberger, right? And eventually he pled guilty. And look, I still say that it's as possible he did it as he didn't do it. And I think these streamers out here that are trying to convince you they can solve the case by listening to videos and by listening to sound and watching videos, and that they're going to solve the case, I think that's lunacy. Although if you want to say it is entertaining, I guess it's highly entertaining, but I don't know. I'm not down with being entertained by what do you call it? Oh, quadruple homicides. Then I found out, I think it was Twiz pointed this out to me. I didn't know what I was doing was wrong. But a lot of times what I do, folks, is I don't go into a stream. And I didn't know this wasn't cool. What I do is when I open YouTube, there's 8 windows of different streams that I can go into. And what I'll do is I'll hover my mouse over one stream and let it go for a little while and read what's being said, and if there's any interest, right? And apparently that's a no-no, because you're not giving the credit. The stream isn't getting a click, I guess. And so I'm watching the stream without giving any benefit to the creator, and I think, well, oh, whatever, fucking Yahoo allows me to do that. I'm going to keep doing that, and I do that with a lot of fucking people. Not because I'm trying to deny them a click. I didn't know that doing it that way, anybody even knew that people do that, right? Yeah, so I don't even know. But you know, like I personally don't have any really. I think Birdie and Pav, they're probably okay people on the regular. If you were to associate, hang out with them. Dago and Lana and so many of these streamers out here, they're probably just, you know, pretty good people like myself. However, I can't make titles every day that draw people in, and the title is just a rehashing or a mixing of the same data in a slightly different way, and you know, that just disturbs me. When you show your true colors, you show your true colors. What does that mean, Twiz? I wonder why Brian K. asked them when he was arrested if anyone else had that's false, darling. He didn't do that. There's no fact to support that, if I'm not mistaken. You're bogarting that click, Sarge. What up there? Cool, dude. Alicia, I'm bogarting it. Yeah, that's just a rumor, darling. But I think the important part about what I was trying to show today is the ineptitude and the willingness. The willingness. Read the previous comment. What? Your previous comment? Oh, I don't think that's a bad thing. Yeah, okay. Othram and IGG. Can you explain this? IGG. Investigative genealogy, something. I forget what it is. Well, it's where they build a family tree. So they took a swab from the sheath, which they said forever was the button snap. Inside, so many different locations on the button snap. How many of you remember that, right? The true color, blah, blah. Yeah, right. So what? Who said that? See, I hate rumors. It makes things even, yeah, there's so many rumors out here. It's not even funny. Anyway, investigative genetic genealogy. I think that's what it's called. And it's no different than if you were to take a swab from your mouth and send it off to 23andMe or one of these other people that'll give you a family tree. That's what investigative genealogy is. Now, it's meant only to provide a tip of a suspect's name. And this goes for even, just so you know, folks, even a fingerprint. A fingerprint doesn't say you committed the crime. And I think a lot of us may misunderstand what it means to find a fingerprint or in this case, transfer DNA on a knife sheath. That in and of itself does not say you were in that home at the time these killings happened. Even a fingerprint or blood's a little weird, but even blood, right? Even blood. You're drunk, you're in there playing fucking ping ball or whatever it is you're doing with them balls, and you win, and someone gets, your friend's joking and he punches you in the head, and you get bleeding. So my point is that evidence is only evidence against the individual in a direct way when you could place the individual at the crime scene at the time the crime took place. And that can include circumstantial evidence, but it also should include direct evidence or evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that anybody else could have committed this crime except you, right? So, in a lot of cases, a husband kills a wife. And of course, his fingerprints are all over the house. His transfer DNA is all over his wife. There's no doubt this guy was around that woman, right? So now you find a murder weapon with a fingerprint on it, and you find that this guy has no alibi to say he wasn't at the house when she was killed. And neighbors say the cars were all there, and you build a case and you convict the guy for killing his wife based on the fingerprint, but the fingerprint then supported by a parade of evidence that shows that there's just no reasonable doubt to think anybody else could have done this. He had the motive. They were going through a divorce. He had the means and the time. And so it's not that difficult to convict somebody in some cases. In this case, there is nothing that leads up to showing Brian Kohlberger's presence in that home ever. And the prosecution themselves are telling us this from their own fucking mouth. There's no way to show a relationship between Brian Kohlberger in that house and Brian Kohlberger and the victims. And even when Cy Ray said that the way he traveled at night gave him access to observe the whole town. Okay, but you're talking about being a few miles away. And I highly doubt that house buried down behind all of them other houses. I highly doubt that you would be able to surveil that house without binoculars. So in other words, you can argue, as Cy Ray tries to point out, that he could have surveilled it. Really? So then why would he have? Here's another problem with Cy Ray's statements. Then why would he have gone into a home that A, had 5 cars in the fucking driveway, B, was lit? Is it a coincidence, or do they frame it to be a coincidence, cool dude? They framed it behind the backdrop of a quadruple homicide, so of course it looks suspicious because of the way they framed the vehicle. They framed the movements of the vehicle. They told you this vehicle was there for a certain purpose. That's just fucked up how you do that. That's just not correct. That's not how our justice system's supposed to work. Whether it's a coincidence or not. But you got a guy that's all over the place. And so when you listen to what Cy Ray is saying, let me get back to that. Cy Ray can't make the argument that Brian Kohlberger surveilled that home, nor can the state even place Brian Kohlberger on that street ever. And so you're going to suggest to me that an unknown individual went into that home and did this. Okay, that even if he did surveil, why would he go in with 5 cars in the driveway? Why the fuck would he go into a house that's fully lit? Somebody needs to explain that to me. He doesn't know the people he's going to kill based on what they're telling us. He is intending to kill 4 people, or at least 2. And yet, all the circumstances surrounding the entry of that home are circumstances any stranger would avoid, no matter what your motive for theft is. He intended to go in there and kill them. It's a party house. His surveillance would have let him know that. People are coming and going constantly. I mean, if anything, this is the worst part about Cy Ray. If anything, because I come from a criminal background. If anything, my surveillance would have told me that's not the fucking job. That's not the place. That's not as much as I want to take those 2 girls out, that's just not the time to do it. That's not the place to do it. That's what my surveillance would have returned to me from my own fucking eyes. There's too many cars there. The lights are on. All these weeks, there's people coming and going in the front door, going out the back door. There's people walking around the house. There's people walking down the street with their dogs. There's cars moving through the neighborhood. It's a compact little fucking area. Everything is an alley. I mean, I'm sorry. But to make an argument, some stranger that let's go, stranger that surveilled the home. Okay. That whole argument is just like a retard argument. It makes no sense. And I don't care, even if this was his first crime, it makes it even worse, because if you don't have a criminal background, right? It's kind of like if I send you into fucking McDonald's to be a cook, you're probably not going to do too good on your first fucking few burgers and shit. Or you might, but then they're going to get, in other words, entering into a situation that you're unfamiliar with, that you don't have a practice or even a complete understanding of what you're going to do, is just crazy, man. Yeah, I don't know what that reply is to there, JK, but I appreciate that. I think, are you talking about the did they arrest anyone else statement that was never made? I just think that if you just try to relax and look at this from a common sense point of view, Brian Koberger is a very unlikely individual to have committed this crime. Now we know that the selfies that he took, that they framed as a victory thumbs up the day of the murders, is false. That statement, that framing of the photograph, is a blatant lie, because they had in their possession 3,800 photographs from Brian Koberger, selfies sent to his family members and his mom, that aren't inconsistent with that photo. And so Brian Koberger's victory thumbs up is bullshit. That is a blatant lie pushed into the community to convict Brian Koberger if it were to go to trial. All these little things that you saw come out of the media. Show me the picture of Brian Koberger's car, okay? Show me the evidence that Brian Koberger was out in the garage cleaning that car. Show it to me. Why weren't the cleaning solutions brought into fucking custody? Why when they show the evidence list of things collected from Brian Koberger's home in Pennsylvania, where's the fucking bleach, the 409, where's the cleaning supply? Where's the bucket? Where's the sponge? You mean to tell me that if I used tools to clean a car to hide DNA and they were blatantly obvious in the garage next to his car, that they wouldn't have collected them? I don't know what kind of stupid people must be to not even question that, not even think about that. The argument that Brian Koberger's vehicle was in his garage in Pennsylvania and they witnessed him cleaning it, or they found the car with cleaning supplies next to it and Brian was wearing gloves in the house. I mean, all of these fucking fake stories are just that. They're fake stories to convince the public this kid's the perpetrator, because they didn't know who the perpetrator was, and or they know who the perpetrators are, and they were doing everything to take the fucking focus off what the real reason was for this attack on that house. That's the most likely scenario. There's a reason these 4 individuals were killed, and it wasn't sex, and it wasn't some dorky fucking dude with that little fucking thumb stuck up in front of a mirror, showing off that he, to my opinion, he's showing his mom he was able to snap that top button on his shirt, because as we know, he has problems with fucking fine motion movements. I'm sure buttoning his shirt was a problem for this kid throughout his life. I mean, you can interpret that any way, but the one way you cannot interpret that picture is a thumbs up for a victory dance that he killed 4 people. Absolutely not. 2 days after that, he goes to a doctor, and the doctor, and this is true, said he was normal. Affable guy, friendly, came in for his appointment. I just can't see how people don't look to simple pieces of information that were injected into this case to frame this kid. The identity of the car, not accurate. Not accurate. And every movement of suspect vehicle 1, it's just not connectable to Brian himself. Every argument or suggestion, like they did in the PCA to get him arrested, they made the inferences that he stalked these people. Complete lie. It's a complete lie. So much of a lie that when the defense hired an expert to poll the community as to the ability to get a jury that would be fair and impartial, all right, that statement about stalking that person asked, did you hear that Brian Koberger was stalking the victims? Right? Yeah, I don't care who started it. Steve G. My point is that every rumor was started and pushed into the media and pushed into the public, pushed onto the streamers and onto the TikTokers and the YouTubers, and them rumors still exist, but nobody's actually sat back and actually looked at this case based on where's the direct evidence. Why is it that a knife sheath that they claim had his DNA on it was mishandled so badly? Not just during the chain of custody, but the collection of the fucking item itself. How is it that a knife sheath that's barely underneath the knee or the thigh of a young woman that's dead in bed, and it's plainly, obviously viewable from anywhere you stand, even if you were outside looking into the window, you could not see that fucking knife sheath. How did it show up on the bed like that? How is it that the drops are under the knife sheath? How could the sheath contain blood splatter that the knife sheath is over? How could that be? And none of that blood splatter transferred to the knife, because by the time the knife sheath got placed on the bed, that blood splatter was dry. That's the only way to explain it. There's no other way in the universe to tell me that knife was there during the bloodletting, during the attack. There's no way to say that the perpetrator put it there immediately after the attack. You can't make the argument because there's no transfer from the sheet or from the bodies or any of the blood in that area on that knife sheath. And then there's other male DNA on that knife sheath. What the fuck about that? I mean, just these facts alone. It's not about whether Brian did it or not. That's the whole argument. It's not Brian that you need to be paying attention to. It's what the fuck were these cops doing? What motivated them to be just so inept and so incapable of doing the job they're supposed to be doing? How is it that you send in a dozen or more people to investigate a crime scene, and then you settle on the most microscopic fucking piece of evidence the world had ever heard of? How is it that you do that? How in the fuck do you parade all those human beings through that house in windbreakers and slacks and fucking street shoes, and you parade them through that whole house before the actual forensic team arrives, who then show up and put on fucking protective clothing? How is it that you're allowed to use that piece of transfer DNA, that minuscule piece of fucking, that's nonsense, man. You can see it bothers me. It bothers me a lot because that's what's happening all over the country. People doing a job that they shouldn't even be there doing. I find that in my trade when I was in the roofing trade. Do you know how many people called me for a quote and decided to go with someone else? And then within a year, 6 months, a year or two later, they're calling back. They need a repair. They can't get a hold of the guy. The guy's been back 8 times, can't fix it. And I'm like, no, I ain't coming to fix your house. You had your chance to hire me in the beginning. You made a choice. It turned out to be the wrong choice. And I'm not here to save you. Have a good day. Don't call back. You can't imagine how many times I've told people that. You got to have some fucking balls. You hire somebody else and they fuck up your house and you want me to come save you. Hell, I hope it leaks until you fucking retire. I have no interest in doing work for people like that. What was a lower price? What was the deal? No, I'm not going to rob you. See, that's the other thing. I could have done exactly what you said, Twiz, but I'm not going to lie, cheat, or steal for money. Absolutely not. And so, no, not charging you anything. Go fucking fix it yourself. You were smart enough to pick the wrong roofer. Now figure it out. You're not calling me. And this guy got all the meat and potatoes. This guy, you paid this guy $12,000 or $15,000 to do the roof that's fucked up, and now you want to repair where I'm going to get crumbs. No, I'm not eating at your table. You had the chance to invite me to your table, and you rejected me. That's fine. Don't call me later for a repair. You got to be out of your fucking brain. Somebody needs to have a talk with you. I ain't that guy. And I'm not going to double, triple, quadruple charge you because you didn't hire me. I'm not going to punish you for that. you're already with it. You already brought the punishment to you. Yeah, but why? Why would I do that? Sorry, I just wouldn't do it. No, I suspect that if the sheath itself had anything to do with this crime, and I doubt it, but let's say that it did, I suspect an investigator picked it up and tucked it there to get it out of their way before they bagged it. That's what I suspect happened. I could be wrong, but I wouldn't listen. I don't. If that's what happened, see, I guess I can see both the good and bad side of things. So if you notice, I'm not hating on the cops at this point. I'm saying that it may have been on the floor and one of the investigators picked it up to avoid it being stepped on or moved or something. And so they tucked it under there, but they should have wrote it in the report. A K-bar knife sheath found on the floor adjacent to the victims in the bed. In order to further the investigation, I picked it up and set it on the bed. And that's what this photo demonstrates. This photo is where I set the knife, and there should have been a photo before they moved it of the knife's original location. So you snap a picture, just like they do with the people that are deceased, right? You snap all of these pictures and all different angles to exactly identify their location in the crime scene and the surrounding related items to the crime scene. The blood splatter, for example. You snap all those pictures before you move the body. And that goes for every piece of evidence. And there is nothing to support that the knife sheath was on the floor and moved there. I'm trying to be fair and say that an investigator moved it. But it looks more, the truth is, it really looks like that knife sheath that wasn't reported on for 3 days, was a fucking trap. And it looks that way, whether that's, here's the worst part is, this is why your chain of custody matters so much. Because beyond a reasonable doubt, they did that with a bracelet too. You're right, Thomas. Beyond a reasonable doubt, that's why the police go to all these fucking extracurricular activities to secure and investigate when they go to investigate. No, he had a kill kit, according to somebody's fucking twits out here. He had a kill kit, but according to Dylan, he had a cylinder. Okay, so the kill kit was cylindrical, whatever. So what did he do? Strip off his clothes, go in and viciously, with more than 150 knife strikes, cause the death of 4 youthful individuals, get covered in blood as he's making these attacks, yet not track one single drop of that blood out of that house? Forget footprints. How about his hair? How about his arms, his fingers? How about his fucking legs? How about his dick? I mean, come on. How could you cause all of that bloodletting and get nothing on you, as Cy Ray suggests is possible? He's an idiot, that guy. And he's an idiot not because he's not capable of brilliance. He's an idiot because he always does what cops always do. I know. Just trust me, I know. And you can go fuck yourself with trust me, I know. Okay? You can go fuck yourself with that. No, he said he didn't leave footprints. He was arguing there was no footprints. There was no sign of cleanup. But yet the same fucking person suggested Brian cleaned his car. But in cleaning his car, oops, Brian missed a spot of blood. Oops. Brian cleaned his car, but oops, left a spot of blood in his car. And it ended up being Brian's blood. Yeah, I know. But what if those, that is not in the case though, Twiz? That's not part of the story, right? What if he I said this before, there's a trillion ways Brian could have entered that home without a car. Why did he need a car? The kid was a jogger. I don't know if he would jog in all black, but maybe he had on that colorful vest, which contrasts black. Maybe he jogged from Pullman or from wherever he parked his car. Maybe he walked. Maybe he parked at the parking lot attached to the school 800 feet away. I don't know. I mean, there's a trillion ways. There's a trillion ways for Brian to have entered that home. I don't discount that at all. I don't discount that Brian could have been involved in this massacre of some way, shape, or form, if not directly. By himself? No, he couldn't have done that. That nothing can convince me he did that unless he comes up and tells the story of exactly how he did that. How did he use 4 different weapons on Kaylee? How did that happen? Not to mention choking her to death. How the fuck did he do that? Did he tell Maddie, can you hold my kill kit? I'll be right with you. I mean, what did this guy do? Even if it weren't Brian. I don't understand how one guy could have done that. And there's no doubt in my mind that in the order of death, when it came to those 2 young women, I think there were 2 people in that room and there were 2 people down on the 2nd floor, that there were 4 perpetrators in this crime, and potentially the survivors is a party to this crime. If not through direct struggles, at least through the alerting of everybody's home, at least through that mechanism, at least through allowing entry into the home, at least to hiding in their rooms, and then being curious enough while you're hearing shit to peek out your fucking door 3 times. That makes sense. I'm not saying she's guilty of anything, but I could make a stronger case against Dylan than I can against Brian. All the information that we have about Brian is exculpatory to Brian. None of it puts him in that home. The knife sheet doesn't put him in that home, nor does the DNA. Those shouldn't even be included in the evidence against the guy. I don't know what Brian did. I think that's what he said. Like I say to my buddies, here, hold my beer. Right? We used to have this thing, say I won't. You won't punch that dude in the face. I won't. You won't. Okay. Hold my beer. You won't race that guy's car. I won't. No, you're scared. I won't. You hold my beer. So maybe Kohlberger did that. Man, he's like, you're not going to kill her, are you? No, I won't. Here, hold my kill kit. You have to jump through big, giant fucking hoops and become a circus clown to accept what the police are telling you happened that night. There's no doubt these young people were killed. I don't doubt that they were killed in the locations where they were found. I'll accept that as 100% pure fact. But that's it. What else can you say? I don't doubt that Dylan and Bethany were home. I don't doubt that either. That I think is consistent. I don't know how that person gained entry into the property. I don't know why the dog was out on the balcony. Why were there dog tracks out on the balcony? And are we to know whether these tracks contain blood or not? There were tracks inside of Kaylee's room from the dog coming in from the balcony. Did somebody enter that property from the balcony? Did somebody climb up to the 3rd floor door and get their ass in there? I mean, that would make more sense if Kaylee and Maddie were the targets. But then why didn't they exit the property that way? And I think now you got to start jumping through hoops. It was easier to travel. I mean, here's the catch-22. Let's suggest the killer climbed, and I could climb onto that 3rd floor balcony, and I'm 60 years old. I guarantee you I could climb on that, get up on that balcony from the ground below, the 3rd floor balcony. Okay? Let's say I climbed up that way to get in. Why would I do that? Well, I would do that to avoid any contact with the residents down below. And if my target were purely Kaylee, I would have then exited the same way that I entered the property. I would not have walked through the house and then come in contact with any of the residents that were alive. So when they tell you that Kaylee is the target, now you have to try to extrapolate. He went in through the door, went up the stairs, did all of that, came back down the stairs, then did all of that over there. Okay. All right. How the fuck somebody would do that? Why would you do that in a house that's fully lit with 5 vehicles outside? When you go into a room and the 2 people you're attacking are alive, how do you do that? How do you strike 3 of the 4 victims in the subclavian artery? How do you do that? That's a fucking outrageous way. That's a hell of a knife strike. That's not a normal. That about 1% of murders that are done by knife, they hit the subclavian artery. In the history of knife killings, I think it's 1 to 4%. It's such a low percentage because it's such a fucking weird wound. It's a significant wound because it does many things for the perpetrator. First of all, it incapacitates the left side of your body. It incapacitates your lung. It interferes your heart function, and it shuts down the nerves that work on your vocal cords. And you bleed internally. It doesn't spray like a jugular vein. You bleed internally and die. That's a horrific wound. And that's what, and someone had to know that wound does what I'm sharing with you. That to me is the modus operandi when Cy tries to frame it as Brian did it. Modus operandi, his behavior, man, Cy, you need to shut the fuck up. What about the subclavian arteries that were struck in Ethan and Zana? Or not Zana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie. That's not modus operandi. People want to argue the slight knife cuts across the neck and the marks on the shoulder are motive. There's a statement there. I'm not saying there's not. But I think the most significant statement are the wounds to the subclavian artery and the subclavian vein, which are directly tied or in the same exact location as nerves that travel through your body. Yeah, I don't know. You guys keep blocking someone in here. And what was that one that said the deleted message? Can I view it? I can view it. What did the person say? Does Twiz, come on now, still wear a ballerina costume when he goes on panels? It's been a while since we've all seen that. I don't know anything about that, but yeah, good that you blocked it. I don't know how to get rid of it again. Yeah, I can't stand Jeff. Because he's the worst kind of agitator. He comes across as a nice, religious, free-spirited, happy, guitar-playing, normal, everyday guy. And he's not. He's a little cunt. Sorry, ladies. He's a little fucking cunt. He's a little weasel. Right? And he comes in and he puts out this fucking nonsense. He used a shower curtain. He must have turned around. Da, 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 da. He's got all this bullshit that he says. It's like, what the fuck? Meanwhile, when you see the thumbs up picture, you see a shower curtain in the same room as Brian Kohlberger. Apparently, Brian Kohlberger had multiple shower curtains, and he treated them like cape because he was some kind of supervillain that with the possession of a shower curtain, he could fly. And he can move from the third floor to the second floor, from the second floor to the outside, without leaving any fucking blood anywhere on the floor at all. Oh, wait. Except for the fucking footprint in Dylan's bedroom. Another blatant lie in the probable cause affidavit to support witness testimony. That's a blatant fucking lie. Right? Clad in black. Walking towards the sliding glass door. And then they got a footprint that confirms Dylan's statements that shows somebody moved through that area and likely exited through the sliding glass door. When that footprint turned out to be made by a shoe that they found in the fucking property and never claimed it didn't belong to any. They don't tell you who it belonged to. No, I'm sorry, Kim. Subclavian artery is hit directly the way they were stabbed was right behind the collarbone while they were sitting up. That knife was plunged into their body, the full length of a K-bar knife, behind the collarbone and straight down. The subclavian artery and the subclavian vein and that nerve pack are protected by your chest, your ribs. Go touch your ribs just below your collarbone and look how dense the bones are there. Look how dense the bones are. No, you're not going to get hit from a forward hit. You're going to hit from above and down into your body. So the knife penetrated the body in the same direction of your head and neck as to your body, up and down. The knife went from in someone's hand and down into somebody right behind their collarbone. That's how you strike the subclavian artery. And to have done that on 3 victims is stunning. That doesn't get talked about by many streamers at all. You're swinging the knife in a downward motion. And in this crime scene, where we're told these people were sitting in bed when they were in bed where they were killed. Right? So if you're standing above the victim and you drove that knife in behind the collarbone, It's all over for you. You're gonna hemorrhage internally. You're gonna cut the artery in the vein. You're done. The idea that let me ask this. Why is it Xana got that? Xana fought from her back, right? Why is Xana's subclavian artery not hit? Why are all her wounds that are from a brutal fight? Why are none of her wounds and all of the strikes that she received, 50 something of them, none of them hit the subclavian artery? And I'm telling you, the reason is the difference in the position. She was on her back or standing fighting somebody and ended up on her back. And that makes it extremely difficult, if highly unlikely to strike that artery and that vein. However, if you're sitting down and I'm standing above you, it's an unlikely way to do it, though. And the descriptions of the wounds identify where the strike occurred from behind the collarbone. Go look at the autopsy reports, Kim. The autopsy reports are what sent me down that road to try to understand what those veins and arteries and nerve pack is. And that's from behind the collarbones where they were stabbed. Go stick your finger there right now, right behind you. See how soft and malleable that skin is. You puncture a knife behind there and that's it. You're done. And you people that are trained to kill with a knife, people that are trained would be aware of that particular strike. I don't see anywhere that can show. I mean, Brian couldn't even fillet fish. And even worse, Brian could not only just not fillet fish, he didn't have the capacity to communicate properly with the customers because he didn't know anything about fish, right? So we could pretty much put the rest of the idea that Brian had specific biological knowledge and the wherewithal to strike that on 3 victims. Victims that were found in bed, victims that were more like you're not standing up on the bed, you were sitting or you were kneeling on that bed, making your attacker taller than you. And that knife would strike straight down into the body that way. That's the way I see it. I could be wrong. You're welcome to disagree with it. But that's just such an uncommon wound in a knife fight that it needs to be considered as an intentional act. That act, they struck that intentionally on 3 of them victims. And they would have struck Xana like that too, except Xana was fighting back. And that also may lead to the argument. That may also lead to the argument that there was one perpetrator. So I'm aware that making this point about the subclavian artery could also interpret one perpetrator. I also think that when you look at some of the very shallow wounds, 1/16 of an inch deep, I think that those aren't from a struggle. Let's see here. Do you get a 14-inch knife into the subclavian vein with a wall there? What? 14-inch blade? What the fuck? Who's got a 14-inch blade? Well, Kim, it's probably the least common wound to take somebody's life. 7-inch blade and handle. Yeah, the length of that K-bar would be capable of striking the subclavian vein and artery from a downward thrust behind the collarbone. Absolutely. No, they weren't lying flat on their back. I suggest that they were in a sitting position when that wound was inflicted. It wouldn't be instantaneous death. Right. Also, what about the 4-inch puncture wound that's round, folks? I think the autopsy tells a story that we're all missing because we're not really focused on it. That 4-inch round wound, both in Xana and Kaylee, is very suggestive of a different weapon. And it shows you that the weapon was used both upstairs and downstairs, and ironically, on both Xana and Kaylee. Right? They're the only 2 people that were inflicted with that round wound. How do you explain that? I'm not, Kim, I'm not arguing about your anatomy, but I researched this. And when I say that hitting the subclavian artery, the most the most likely access point, and what I believe the injuries described was a puncture wound behind the collarbone. So it's not me making it up or me just thinking that that's how it happened. That I think is in, if I'm not mistaken, it's in the autopsies for 3 of the 4 victims. So there's the most effective way to hit that is from behind the collarbone straight in. Can you do it through the chest cavity up by the upper ribs, the rib cage? Yeah. And I'm sure that there's a lot of punctures there as well. But ribs are a very hard thing to, they normally will break the tip off a knife, especially a knife like a K-bar. It's just it's an amazing thing to do on 3 healthy individuals, right? Yeah, you could take surgical instruments and get around the protections of the rib cage, Kim. I'm not saying you wouldn't lay someone out, you wouldn't sit somebody up to perform surgery. That would just be insane. In the hospital, of course, you'd be on your back, but you have the tools that'll cut through exactly where you need to cut through and exactly what you need to insert to do what you need to insert. Yeah, it's a 7-inch blade. And go read the autopsy reports, Kim. And you may say, that is an access point. That is correct. That knife punctured behind the collarbone and into the body. And that motion of blade movements straight down behind the collarbone, not into the collarbone from the front, not from the back, but straight right at the shoulder, right there, right down straight into the body is the easiest access point to the subclavian vein and artery. So enough on that. Well, he's saying that the wall may have obstructed. Yeah, straight down, Regina, straight in. Put your fingers, folks, behind your collarbone. See how malleable and how easy that flesh is there. There's no protection to stop a knife going in behind the collarbone, and it's going to hit. If the blade is big enough, it's going to hit that area. Doing it from the front on 3 victims, and that's not what I read in the autopsy reports, it would be there is a wall blocking it. He's not telling a lie. Doing it with a K-bar knife of that kind of size, you'd have to fight through the wall. And he's talking about the ribs, the skeleton, the human skeleton that protects that area. So anyway, on to something else. Is Kim Jeff? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. And I don't really care. Until I know someone's Jeff, I'm just going to respond to the people in the chat because, she's making a good point. There's multiple ways to get to that artery. That is not a lie. I'm not too surprised if you could come in through the back and get to it. Okay, then it can't come in through the back. But you're talking about surgical procedures. You're not talking about wounds delivered by a K-bar, Kim. Okay, so it's slightly different. And when you read the autopsy reports, that's where the deepest wound, if I'm not mistaken, was struck on 3 of the victims. Behind the collarbone and hitting the subclavian vein and subclavian artery, which I'm sure you'll agree are right where the nerve pack is that controls the left lung, the left arm and shoulder, the vocal cords, parts of the heart. The wound was from the top down. That's why I'm saying. I don't even know what the hell, Kim Young, what you're doing in here. I don't even know why I'm having a discussion with you. The autopsy report speaks for itself, folks. But you can just pierce the heart and lung instead of the artery you're talking. Yeah. Listen, that's my understanding that I got from reading that autopsy reports on the 4 victims. And I find it rather fucking unique that the person that was most likely fighting from their back is the only one that didn't get hit in the subclavian artery. But the other ones that apparently were sitting when the fatal blow to that artery was struck, all got that wound. Well, that's fine, Kim. No need to scream and yell. I think comparing a surgery to repair that artery and vein is significantly different than a knife wound that comes in from behind the collarbone. Go read the autopsy report, and you'll say, yeah, based on the description the coroner gave, that knife came in from top down, not from the front in, not through the chest cavity in, but from behind the collarbone down. The hair in Ethan's hand. Well, that Cy Ray. It's not that it's not valued. You're describing a surgical procedure, Kim, and we value that. It's a safe space for people that aren't Jeff. What else was I going to say here? Somebody said something. TikToker, yeah, the ones I've experienced. The nurse keeps. Yeah, I don't mind your opinions, and I'm not taking the value away from the surgical procedures that are required to get to the subclavian artery. I'm not arguing that at all. Right? They do open heart surgery or something. Don't they crack ribs sometimes or something? Yeah, I'm not taking anything away from her at all. I agree with her understanding of surgical procedures on that vein. It says the wounds are from the top down. And look, here's the important point I want to make. Well, it wouldn't clear up. It would clear up, I guess, some stuff. And I agree. They haven't released what they're supposed to release because they're hiding all the information. Because the information, even the shit they're willing to release, is exculpatory to the accused. Right? That's the biggest problem with this case. The public should be aware. You fucking people work for us. You're representatives of us as government officials. And we have the right to know what happened to our neighbors and our friends and our colleagues and other people. What up there, Beth Wagner? Did anyone think Ethan could have done this and then covered it up? No, I don't know how he could have done that and covered it up. No, not even. No, then why isn't he covered in her blood, Regina? Where's her blood all over him? And that mess that poor young woman was left with. Come on. Why would they hide the webs? Why would they hide the webs? I don't know, Twiz. But no, I'm going to say that, Regina, I don't know. That theory doesn't really work. Right, and he would have been, he would have been covered in blood from the girls upstairs. There would have been tracks through the house, and if his ultimate thing was murder suicide, there'd have been no. That place would have been a horrific mess. The hair in Ethan's hand. The most we know about the hair that was recovered from not just Ethan's hand, we also know there was hair that was in a pool of blood below Ethan's hand, as if it fell out of his hand. So there was hair on the floor and attached to the bed frame. We also know that there was hair not associated to the victims between the two young women upstairs. So there was more hair than just Ethan's hand. Now, Cy Ray said it was one strand. And let me be clear, that was reported to be one strand of hair in the reports of discovery given to the defense. However, it was Dr. Turvey that upon examining the information and the evidence and the photos of the evidence, that there was more than one strand of hair in his hand. So I think Cy Ray was going off the information he had, but I think Turvey had a deeper understanding because he was tasked to review the crime scene. Where Cy, but that, I don't know that I think he's just saying that because he wants to get around the talk. Like he doesn't want to talk about fog lights. I get why he doesn't want to talk about fog lights. Yeah, the hair, but all that hair was what are they, macro, what do they call that? It was given a macro examination. In other words, they determined that hair that they claimed was debris or initially, but that the hair was checked under a microscope, and it was not anything that belonged to Brian Koberger. Yeah, I think the fog light argument is just it. Look, there's the PCA excludes Brian Koberger's car. Let me just say that, and you'll understand that if you understand the difference in the time they claim his phone turned off, and then subsequently the immediate camera footage of a vehicle they claim to be suspect vehicle 1 around the time of 2:47 a.m. Right. So even if it was 2:49 a.m. that they saw their first glimpse of a white vehicle they claim is Brian traveling towards Moscow, it's wrong. It can't be Brian. Brian was still connected to a network until 2:54 a.m. going north, which proves unequivocally that suspect vehicle 1, as outlined in the PCA, is not Brian Koberger. It does not mean that car is not involved in the crime. Even worse, it does not mean that the car driving around the crime scene is not that car. But the worst thing about all of that is that being true, then it exonerates Brian. Right? So what ends up happening here, folks, is that needs to be made clear. The camera footage is connected to the movements of a vehicle that begin at 2:47 a.m. And Brian Koberger's vehicle cannot be that vehicle. Period. End of story. It's that simple. Now, that does not mean that suspect vehicle 1 isn't the correct vehicle that committed the crime, right? What reason did he have? That's just not a cell phone. That's not a cell phone. Who are you replying to it, lady? What did lady say? I missed what lady said. I got to back up just a little bit. Bear with me, folks. Chat moves sometimes faster than me. If the photo of the hair and the strands were long and Brian Cohen didn't have long hair, none of the hair found at the crime scene, that was never really, we never heard about that until Dr. Turvey came into this, and he came out a couple of months ago, right? And we didn't know for 2.5 years, 3 years. We had no idea. And according to Turvey, that information, not just about the hairs, but the information about the chain of custody and all the nonsense with the knife sheath was discovered and in the last release of discovery to the defense. Right. 2:47, the car turns right, not left. So explain yourself. Are you saying that the car that they're claiming from 2:47 forward was Brian's car? Is that what you're saying, Twiz? Yeah, it was a week. Well, it was right before trial. I know it's different cars, Twiz. I understand it's different cars. But the way I read and understand it is any video footage that they supply connected to their timeline is not Brian. So are you saying Brian's car went towards Moscow? Are you saying that the car that they picked up on Route 270 was Brian Koberger's? Twiz? I'm not. You're saying the exact opposite of what I understand to be the explanation. All right. All right. Yeah. All right. So I'm trying to understand what you're writing. That's what the fuck I'm talking about. I thought this topic was dead. The car in the surveillance footage that they claim was heading towards Moscow is not Brian. And they base all the movements based on their argument that he turned his phone off at 2:47 a.m. No, they can retry him again. They may have a second shot at this. I'm not sure. I'm thinking they may not. He accepted the plea deal. He was coerced and he accepted it. He's innocent. That may entitle him to a retrial. But I think the retrial is going to exclude so much evidence that there'd be really no case to bring against the guy. That's what I think you're going to find. That because they fucked up in their reports, because they fucked up an application. Yeah, if he rescinds the plea, then in fact they may have another bite at the apple themselves. But I think that bite at the apple is going to not include DNA, and it's not going to include the knife sheath. And so now what do you got? Some blurry pictures of a car driving around? What are you left with? Some blurry pictures of a car driving around that in fact you can't even identify to belong to any human being on the planet. Right? They have no way to go back after this guy. If the lies they used and coerce him into a plea deal come forward, then it's over for them. I don't think that one expert was saying that to Cy Ray when that Kristen from the custody queen suggested Cy said we as if he was part of the prosecution when that's not what he said at all. He was repeating what the defense person or what the prosecution guy was saying about the DNA. Without the DNA, there's no case. Yeah, I think there was persons. In all fairness, I'm not so sure. And look at it, it's just as possible that there were more than two people in each room, and that the person wielding the knife was was the one that did the actual killing. But I don't think that as they lay it out, that this crime scene turned out to be the way it turned out to be. And one guy did this all by his lonesome self. Yeah, he said there's a motive and a connection. And I don't, there's no information to support that statement. Again, it's a trust me, bro. Trust me, bro. How long they hold on to evidence after a conviction, I'm not sure, but there's probably until all the appeals are exhausted, if I'm not mistaken, there's no time on that, Thomas. It's until the process of appeals and everything is done, and the one that's convicted has no recourse. That doesn't mean they throw it out, but I think that at that point they may have the ability to do that. I'm telling you, whoever did that was frequent into that house. Then why would they make the claim to boast of their claims that they got the right guy? Well, because that's how our system works, man. I'm telling you, if you don't understand, here's another example. Like, I take issue with people that argue Hillary Clinton's got 57 dead bodies. I'm not a Democrat. I won't even entertain that conversation until you can connect her to any one of those crimes. The idea that 57 people that they knew or had contact or associations with ended up dead in weird circumstances isn't enough for me to say Hillary Clinton committed the crimes or was part of the criminal plot to kill these people. I try not to make leaps like that, right? And I can't stand that woman. I just can't. I like Bill as a person, but I don't like his politics. Okay? But I'm not going to make that fucking jump that because of that quantity still doesn't tie her to it. I mean, that's a circumstantial argument. And you got to jump, just like all the people that believe Brian did it. You got to accept these circus acts that they sell you. And if the circus acts, you're willing to believe that, then that's the road you're going to stay on. And same thing with the idea. That's why I brought up the Hillary Clinton stuff. The Clintons had 57 people killed. Well, where's the evidence, man? I mean, you can make this massive circumstantial argument, but that doesn't leave the only conclusion means that they were part of it. It doesn't mean that. You can say that. You can run around believing that like you believe in God or something. Fine. But I'm not going to entertain that as a factual conclusion based on the information available. And the same thing should apply to any person. So I guess what I'm trying to share with you is it doesn't matter if I like you or don't like you, if I agree with you or don't agree with you as a person, right? So, like people run around saying Michelle Obama's a transgender. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's not true. I think it's kind of like a joke. It's like a meme. I don't know. But there's people who will swear until their dying breath that she is a transgender. And I don't know. I have no idea. Okay? I just don't. That's what I'm saying. And I don't like what Obama did when he was president. I don't like it at all. I just don't like it at all. People argue that those were people that were like Clinton was for the people and a bunch of bullshit. Neither did I like George Bush. I don't even like Donald Trump for the sake of liking Donald Trump. I like some of his policies. I'm very, very much in support of some of his American policies, right? So that doesn't make me a Trumpican, but I don't suffer. Not only do I not suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, I don't suffer from Clinton derangement syndrome. I don't suffer from Obama derangement syndrome, Bush derangement syndrome. I just don't. Facts are facts. And if your facts add up to a conclusion that's supportable with factual data, then I'll believe it. I'll accept it as a truth. But I'm not going to just jump on the bandwagon so that I can pat myself and my buddies on the back because we think Clinton's killed them people or Michelle Obama's a tranny. I don't mind jokes about it or memes about it. Have fun with it. I don't care. But where's the evidence to support that? Truly. They argue the kids don't look like him. Really? Well, I don't agree with that either. I don't agree with that either. That one girl looks like Michelle and the other girl looks like Obama. I don't know how people don't see that. I mean, Michelle Obama's got like a manly frame on her. If she slapped Obama, the guy would go flying. You wouldn't even need rocket ships to go to the fucking moon. Elon should just hire Michelle Obama to slap her husband. That woman would knock that guy across the fucking house with one blow. Now go look at that one daughter. She's built just like her mother. Go look at the other daughter. Built just like Obama. Facial features that have similarities to the parents. I mean, I look kind of like my parents, but I don't. My nose is nothing like my father's. I have his voice. I have his facial hair. But I was given away and raised in a separate family, unknowing to myself. Just listen to this. And do you know how many people told me I had my mother's nose? Well, that wasn't my mother. Do you know how many people told me I looked like my father? That wasn't my father. This is what I mean. People's observations are what they're viewing to themselves. I give you the credit for that's valid. But I can't tell you how many times as a kid I was told that I looked like the parents that I was told were my mom and dad, and it wasn't true. I didn't find out until anyway, it's kind of funny. And then even the parents that that did give birth to me, I have resemblances that you would say, yeah, you look like your dad. More importantly, I sound like him. I could answer the phone and everybody would think I was him. Every single fucking time. Yeah. That's it, Lady Speedwell. Bear with me, guys, 1 second. Okay, I'm back. People see what they want to see, and they were complimenting. That's a cow. You look just like your stepmom. You got her nose. Okay. I didn't know any different, but this is what I mean. It's like my big hang up with the car is because I was involved in a traffic case with my car, and I ended up winning in court. But they made arguments that it was my car that did this and my car that did that. But they never had any images of my car. They never had any year, make, model of my car. They only had the color of a black two-door sedan. And that's the only thing they had. By the time that I was pulled over, I was broken down in a neighborhood miles away from where they claimed I was going 135 miles an hour. And I was going 135 miles an hour, I think. My speedometer at that time ended at 120 and it was pegged, right? So I literally did do the crime. But by the time they got me 20 minutes or a half hour later, I was miles from the crime in a neighborhood with an overheated engine, smoking a cigarette. And they connected the overheated engine and my cigarette, or my presence in a black two-door sedan. They made the claim that that was the car on the highway. Well, that didn't hold up in court. Case was dismissed. So that's why when I look at probable cause affidavits and I look at some of these other accusatory instruments, if they're trying to get you to make a leap of faith, that's not how you're supposed to convict somebody. Now, back in the day when I did this, there was no cameras on people's houses they could go and collect, right? So the technology has moved on, and I no longer drive down the highway at 135 miles an hour. And here's the you know what the most fucked up thing about that was this cop had pulled somebody over, and their lights on the car were flashing. And I decided that I was gonna go as fast as I could possibly go and blow by that cop, thinking he was never gonna come out after me, and the fucker did. He never got close enough to know I was in a Ford or a Chevy or a Dodge or a Toyota. He never got close enough to identify anything on the car other than it being black. So I walked. And when I look at the Brian Koberger argument about the vehicle, that shouldn't even have been accepted by a court of law. That judge should have required something that made it likely to be Brian's to the exclusion of all other white cars. Right? They say it wasn't displaying a front license plate. Well, do you got an image that shows that? Or you got an image of a car going by with headlights blurring your view? A view that you wouldn't see a license plate anyway because of the headlights, because of the time of night and the glare from the headlights. Your cameras just weren't going to pick up a front license plate, right? So all right, and Ridge Road is in relation to the crime in what sense? Isn't that also where they got the 15 to 16 from, that particular picture? Twizzle stick? The images around the property don't show an Elantra with no front license plate. And so this is what I'm trying to say. Their argument that a car had no license plate that was involved in the crime is bullshit, because there's no way to know whether the car driving around that property had a license plate or not. .402 or 404. Well, then it could be Brian's car that pulled into that property, right? Right, Wes? Right or wrong? I mean, if that's provable, what you just said, and that's a fact, then that car could be Brian Koberger's in that neighborhood. Yeah, let me look at something. Where is Ridge Road? Railroad Street. There's Elm Street. There's, this fucking. Oh, I know what I need to do. Here, click it off of that. Get away from satellite view. There's Pierce Road. Right behind the house, he says. Wow. That one. There's Lake Avenue. I don't see where Ridge Road is right behind the house, but anyway, I'll look at that on my own time instead of wasting the time for you guys out here. Oh, I didn't see. When did you send pics on Discord, Twist? Yeah, I don't have Discord open. When did you send me a Discord? Let's see here. Discord. I do have a Discord account. There's Twiz, or is that? Let's see here. Okay, so I see that picture of a car with no plate. Oh, reduce. It gets too bright and blurry. It's funny how cars they all look like they have a face in the front. Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Oh, okay. I got it. I see the pic. Reduce. Shows a side view of the car. Of a car. Did you ever look to see if the rims on this vehicle have any similarity to the rims on the car they're giving you a pic of? Yep, I got it. No, I think, like I said in the beginning, if he committed the crime, the best thing for him to have done was to go to trial. This plea deal, I thought was the worst thing he could have done. I don't think that's the way to fight this case. We'll see how it does going forward. However, I think that he would have been much better. Look, I can't tell you how many times I committed a crime and went and stuck with the not guilty, and it eventually got dismissed because they couldn't prove their argument. That happens. That happens a lot. Come on with this thing's just and it's not your fault, Twiz. It's the fault of my machine. So where 1125 is, and which way was he heading? That's Walenta Drive over there. You're saying that's Ridge Road? That's called Ridge Road? Yeah, I got it here. Let me close this Discord. So I got two pics from you. One of them showing a location. And let me ask you, that location that's 1125 Ridge Road. Yeah, the roads are all fucked up. Doesn't make sense on the map. No, it certainly doesn't. So that's 1125 Ridge Road. So let me ask you this. What does it show what direction that car traveled from that point? Or do they daisy chain that location with cameras to the house? Because if they do, that's pretty fucking damning right there. Are they able to daisy chain the location of that vehicle? Was it traveling north? Or was it traveling, which way was it traveling on Ridge Road? That's the thing. They can't tell you. Yeah, so they can't then extrapolate and get that house over to that car over to the house. That's all the headlight on trees and shit. Okay. So let me think, where is it on this big map? Boyd, Walenta. So that Ridge Road. Stop moving, Google, before I slap you on. But that's where all the headlights on the trees and shit. But so it could have turned and another car come in. I think he has a sufficient argument against that car based on the way they wrote the PCA and based on the fact that Bill Thompson changed the time at the sentencing hearing. I think that's a big tell right there. Why did he suddenly decide 254 was when his phone went off? When in fact the argument the PCA was 247 and they daisy chained from that time. So but the PCA is shit, right? I agree with you. But that's also what they use to arrest a guy. That is also what they use to get more warrants, right? And that's my point the whole time. The PCA is an exculpatory document. And the PCA They turned their back on it at that sentencing hearing, which tells you that they themselves know. There were at least, I think, 5 other DNA samples at that scene that they didn't test, not to mention the hair samples that they didn't test. So that gives you 6, 7, 8, 9 areas of investigation they ignored. Right? Payne perjured himself in the PCA. They did. And this is what he's going to get released on if he gets released. Not to say that they won't get another bite at the apple and then he'll have to go to trial to defend himself against the murders. But I think that trial is going to have a problem with evidence. Those 4 brothers are related to Brian Koberger, darling. There's a connection between Brian Koberger and them 4 brothers. Othram, and it's interesting you brought that up. No, you couldn't prove perjury with that because it's to the best of my knowledge. I signed under the penalty of perjury. So, yeah, you're not going to get him on that. But the other DNA, including the 4 brothers were distant relatives or related to Brian Koberger through some part of the tree. The reason the FBI came in was because Othram used authorized DNA databases to come to that conclusion. And they could get no more from the databases that they're legally authorized to use. The FBI got involved. The FBI then amplified the DNA, which I argue is tampering with evidence, but whatever. The amplification was then fed into systems that law enforcement, based on user agreements by the company, tell the people that sign up that their DNA is not available to law enforcement without a warrant. The Justice Department has a policy as well, okay, that you don't go into those databases. And they did it anyway. And that's exactly like, and exactly why, when they gave the name Koberger, they said it was a tip. And that tip was just that. Because they wanted to keep from the public and they wanted to keep it on the down low how they actually got to Brian Koberger. That DNA in one warrant application, I don't 4 brothers no, they were on his tree from what I heard. And they would have got to Koberger, and they got to Koberger eventually, okay? And I don't have an argument with them doing that, but they need to do it by the book. There needs to be warrants. There needs to be requests. These websites that have these databases need to be alerted that the FBI has an interest in finding a suspect, right? Yeah, they didn't have the same last name. You're right. She said well, she didn't have all the discovery to review, so that's not perjury. Let's be fair. Right. And so they then took that database. The FBI took it. They ran it into the common databases that prohibit law enforcement's activity without a warrant. And then they came to understand Brian Koberger. And then they gave that name to Idaho. And Idaho was supposed to keep that shit out of their warrants and stuff. And they didn't. There's another fuck up. I mean, a tip is a tip. You don't identify the tipster. The tipster's protected in any way a tip is given. And that's the game they were playing with this case. This is how you see the inner workings of your law enforcement. Now, if that tip was given and there was no mention of the tip being done through IGG, then we never would have known that. That's exactly the way they want to do it. Now, that tip, if you then can daisy chain evidence that shows Brian Koberger was at that home at that time of night, then that DNA becomes a relevant piece of information. You see, then you swab the fucking perpetrator and you compare his DNA to the fucking DNA on that sheath. They didn't do it that way. They went, and that's what Cy was saying. They went all around the fucking horn because they fucked up. Yeah, he didn't have any issue with the discovery deadlines. He didn't hold the prosecution's feet to the fire for anything. And as a matter of fact, once that last document dump was given to them, a week before trial, Hitler should have automatically brought those parties in and really, even in closed doors, went after the prosecution and extended the fucking trial at the very least, for 90 days. How did you say? She also received. The FBI took the sample from Othram, amplified the sample, and ran it through databases that are not connected to law enforcement. So there's two databases, as an example, that law enforcement has free reign within, including the CODIS system. They compared the DNA that they could compare, that they had with those systems, and they came up with 4 potential distant relatives to Koberger, but not Koberger's name. So in other words, there was a hit in their system, but not a hit that identified Brian. The FBI then took that DNA sample, amplified it, and ran it through other computer databases that are not law enforcement supported, that do tell the end user that law enforcement has to have a proper warrant to access their database. They used those databases to identify Brian Koberger from the sample that was given to them from Othram. They then contacted Idaho and gave a tip that your suspect may in fact be Brian Christopher Koberger. It was then behoovent or required for the state of Idaho now to build a case against Brian Koberger, a case that would show him at that home, evidence that places him at that property. You see? Now, this would have been done properly. We never would have known about the FBI involvement. All we would have known is they were given a tip. The name given was Brian Koberger. And what they should have actually done at that point was approach the suspect, in my opinion. Not write a fucking warrant for murder and burglary. I think that once the tip was given, it was their responsibility not to use that as evidence of committing the crime, but evidence of likely involvement in the crime, and then investigate Brian Koberger. They didn't search his car, as you know, until after the arrest. They didn't go into his apartment. They didn't even approach this guy. We do have a Hitler problem. A Hitler problem ain't going away. It's just not going away. Hitler has 2 choices. Say, okay, whatever, Mr. Koberger, and we'll give you your day in court, or that you've presented nothing to the court that reaches the level of a miscarriage of justice, case dismissed. I mean, Hitler's going to go one way or the other. I wonder. Yeah, I don't know what he's going to do. I always listen. This is my kryptonite. If there's any kryptonite that affects me, is that I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt until evidence closes that door. Well, he retires in 2027. That could easily drag until then, at least. Hitler's going to remain a problem. Well, potentially. Because at this point, Brian's just asking for a fucking hearing that then would grant him a new trial, right? Ultimately. And I think that the new trial ultimately may not be pursued by the state of Idaho. Or if it's pursued, it's going to be lacking a lot of the data that was fed to the public. And there's going to be a lot of outrage from the public. What do you mean you can't use the knife sheath? Yeah, we're almost at 2027 now. Quit reminding us there, Alicia. Thompson, good. I hope he stays there. I hope he's the prosecutor that's got to argue this fucking thing. I don't know how that's going to all go. It's going to be interesting. I think there's going to be a lot for us to learn. We may learn that Brian Koberger is the sole perpetrator of this crime. I mean, let's not forget that in spite of the things that we're pointing out that we find to be not just suspicious, but flagrant lies, miscarriages of fucking information. All right. That may not matter. That may not matter. I think the problem for the state is going to be that if what Cy Ray is saying, that there is, it was Jeff Nye that Cy Ray was talking about. Thanks for bringing up that name. But anyway, I think the state's going to be in trouble. when it comes to the evidence that's going to be allowed at trial. And if they want to bring different evidence, right, they're going to have a problem with that unless they can secure with chain of custody that the evidence had been fucking discovered after all of this shit, after he filed for fucking relief. And that none of the evidence that they're going to bring to that trial can be in the possession of the prosecution that wasn't presented to the fucking defense. This is a big problem for these people. I mean, this could turn into a big fucking. This is what I said in the beginning. There's no sense. I don't know if this kid did it. I'll accept that for the moment that he did it. And yet, why is it they had to fabricate or make up all these fucking stories? Why did they have to disparage him in every media outlet every time a camera showed up, and interpret information that was and leave out information that was exculpatory? The defense couldn't talk to the press, but the prosecution could get the press to talk about it. They could release this info and frame this kid in the media as the only potential perpetrator, even if that's accurate. That just shouldn't be allowed. And if that's allowed, then I think the defense and the defense should have been given a free rein. Yeah, I think Turby's going to help out too. I agree with you there. Anyway, what is it? I'll stay on for another 9 minutes and then get out. StreamYard keeps telling me they want me to pay $481 to use their software for the next year. They can fucking kiss my little hole. Last time I paid $279, so I ran it for a couple of years. And I don't mind paying $279, but I am not paying $500 basically to use the software. To use StreamYard, $481 for the year. This is not even that I don't have a problem with the dollar amount. I can afford that, but I paid $279 2 years in a row. And look and they're telling me $480 something is 50% off. 50% off. Resubscribe. No. Sorry, StreamYard. No. Yeah, I don't know what other software is out there. And I don't object to paying for it. I kind of enjoy doing these streams occasionally. I've done a few the last several days. But I don't, I'm not giving them that much money. Does anybody got any ideas on what other software besides StreamYard is effective? And I mean, it'd be a learning curve for me again, but I'm not paying anybody $500 a year. Remember, I live in New York, so you got to add 8% sales tax to that. Yeah, there are other programs to use there. As a matter of fact, can't I just use Yahoo directly? I think the big addition to these is there's some features here that you don't, like if I use Yahoo directly, I don't think I can connect you to come into the stream. I can't do a call-in show. Well, I could probably do a call-in show with Yahoo. I just put it down like where it says my name, I could put the phone number there. But there's features these things give you, uploading documents and clips and blah blah blah. I'm not sure that Yahoo directly allows that. Yeah, there's but nobody knows of other software like StreamYard. Let's see here. Oops, I closed. I have to go into I have to go back in the Discord. Yeah, I know there's a few. Do you know the names of them there, Twitter? Restream. All right, let me write it down. I'm listening. Restream. Miss Potts used a couple. You got, I haven't talked to Miss Potts. I haven't seen her in a while either. Yep, Restream. I wrote it down. Like I said, I don't object to paying for services rendered. They're providing me access to a community and to YouTube, and they give me features that I use, but I just object to the outrageous price I'm going to give you guys. I'm going to pay you like $45 a month to use it. What are you, out of your mind? That's just crazy. And you're doing me a favor because you claim you charge $860 something a year for this service without this 50% discount. Yeah, the price keeps going up. You're right, but I know they'll give it to me to $279. I'll send him an email and tell him, I'm not one of them guys that are fucking out here getting paid to be here. I don't have fucking thousands of followers. I got like almost 3,000 followers. I have no membership. I don't do anything for money. I once in a while will drop. It'll drop and I get right back into the stream. But I'm comfortable with StreamYard. I don't have any complaints against the services that I use. Yeah, I don't have the complaints these other folks have. I think most of the problems with StreamYard aren't StreamYard. It's your internet connection. In all fairness. I think that has a lot to do with it. So I don't have any beef with StreamYard that way. It served me well. No one's pissing on my leg and telling me it's raining. I'll shoot your dick right off. And then I'll do it in the nude so that I don't get any of your blood on me. Because apparently being naked repels blood splatter. Holy shit. Unbelievable. Right? I mean, how can an expert make that comment? He committed the crimes in the nude. I mean, I don't know. And I think it would be worse. You'd leave way more of a mess if you did it in the nude. I mean, clothes absorb. I'm sorry, but being nude, you don't absorb, right? I don't want to get too graphic because I'm ready to say some nasty shit, but I won't. But your skin will not absorb, okay? And a pair of pants will, a shirt will, a sweater will, a hat will, a glove will, right? Which means that reduces the amount of transfer unless you directly come in contact with something. So, but the amount of bloodletting in this crime scene, I don't know that it's even possible, fully clothed, unless you were wearing like the Stay Puft Man and you're one big absorbent. You wrapped yourself in toilet paper or something, or cotton balls. You went to CVS and bought up, or you went to some company that sells fabric and you bought all their cotton puffs and you cotton puffed yourself, and then the cotton absorbs all the blood and maintains it. Hey, Twist, did you see that picture of the potato chips on the couch from the first guy that walks in with his webcam or his body cam? And the potato chips are on the arm of the couch. And then later you see an image and the potato chips are now, instead of being on the arm of the couch, they're on the cushion of the couch. And a diaper type thing is sitting on the arm of the couch. Yeah. You haven't seen them clips? You haven't seen those pictures? That's fucking awesome, man. Who moved the bag of potato? Were the cops eating those chips? I thought that someone else said Bethany claimed she took them to her room. I don't remember hearing that. But there is an image that shows the bag of chips that Dylan said they were eating chips up there, watching TV before they all went to bed. That bag of chips is sitting on the arm of the black couch. Then later on, another body cam shows up. And that arm of the couch no longer has potato chips on it. The potato chips have been moved to the cushion. And that's it. The potty training pad was now on the arm of the couch where the chips were. It wasn't there in the first image of the chips. Yeah, it's some crazy shit, man. I also said this a long time ago. That footprint outside of Dylan's door, and because they used amino black on it, I suspect that footprint was dog urine, not blood. I don't think it was blood. I think it was dog urine. I said that many years ago, and I think that that's an accurate portrayal of what that was. And the fact that they found the shoe in the house that made it, I don't think that that's a bloody footprint. They call it a latent print, but I'm not too sure that's because I think amino black picks up on proteins, which would be in the urine of anybody. And so I think that footprint outside of Dylan's door is a footprint that was left there, that was placed there by someone that had stepped in some pee. But why isn't there a trail? That's the other real curious thing. You would think just one print, just one. I could see one shoe right? How often have you stepped in dog shit in both feet? Almost never, right? It's always one shoe. Same with urine. If you'd have stepped on that dog pad. Yeah, they were doing everything they could. They used that footprint to support her statement that she witnessed the guy in black. They looked at her, made eye contact, and walked out towards what she thinks he left through the sliding glass door. But remember, that footprint they used to tell us that proves his path of travel based on her observations. So that footprint supported her observations. But I honestly think that footprint's location and the fact that I don't know it's a fact, but the thought that it's actually dog urine and not blood, I think it's got nothing to do with the crime scene at all. Zero. And the other curious thing is, why did the Mino black go all into Dylan's room, but not out into the hallway, not out into the kitchen? Go look at that crime scene photo. It's very weird. Why the whole area isn't covered in amino black? Why did it spray and get messed up into Dylan's bedroom? That to me indicates that the print came from the bedroom. The BK did it. I want to know why Dylan not DM2. She's lucky if that's true. Yeah, I don't know. There's just too many curiosities around the witnesses. All right, it's 2:00. I thought I was going to do a very short stream. I probably didn't move the ball in any one direction or not. But it is what it is. If you don't mind, hit like, not because hitting like gives me any money, but because it pushes me out into the algorithm. And maybe some stray, insane people like us will come across the stream. I don't know that their timeline is accurate. There's arguments to go both ways. I also think, though, that if it is accurate, I think it was very much important to realize that she looked out a window and saw a black vehicle, black SUV or a black truck with a weird taillight. I think that information is quite interesting. Why did she look out Bethany's window? You can't answer why. But she not only says she saw a person, but she also, once she ran down to Dylan's room, saw a vehicle drive by the house. But that was ignored. I don't know that there was a bloody shoe print on Dylan's jacket. I never heard that. I know there was blood on it. I know Talbot ruined it, but I don't believe it was a shoe print. In all fairness, you're the first person I've ever heard refer to the bloody jacket having a shoe print on it. I've not seen that anywhere. I've not read that anywhere. I've never heard it on anyone's stream except mine now, I guess. So yeah, I'm someone. I don't know which he was, but I'm pretty sure it was not a shoe print. Yeah, but that's just people. They're making conclusions that the evidence didn't show. There's images of that jacket splayed out and pictures of it, and I don't. And there's also images of it where they're pointing to different locations of blood, and with little arrows or little markers. And in no way, shape, or form do those images refer to or even suggest or even visually offer you the idea that there's a shoe print on the jacket. I mean, that's fucking weird that somebody's out there saying that. There's nothing I've seen to support that statement at all. That's like saying they were killed on the moon and flown home. Yeah, full Forrest Gump and ran through the end with some. Bronx Tale said there were 2 shoe prints, and she read it in the documents. No, I think she's mistaken, man. I mean, in all fairness, that's another person that's recently got involved in all of this stuff, and that's fine. But that statement, I think, is inaccurate. Show the document. Yeah, have them show the document or bring the document in. I think you can contact me through here, but on Discord, let me see here. There's got to be a way to link people to me on Discord, right? Twiz knows how to do all that shit on Discord. He's a Discord junkie. Twiz's drug, Discord. see here. It was in a recent document. Oh, well, listen, I'm not really claiming anyone's wacky out here. I mean, I think there are some wacky ones, but it is what it is. And yeah, if there's documents to support that, that's a stunning revelation, right? But again, I'd like to see the documents where it's shown as a shoe print. Not because the streamer's telling me that, but because there's evidence of it. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, that's something to look forward to. I'll keep my eye out for a shoe print on Dylan's jacket. That's that green one with those little pink things or something on it, right? It's the only jacket I know of. Yeah, and if there's a bloody shoe print that was found, right? I don't know about it, but if Logan said it is in there, I believe her. Well, I don't disbelieve her. I just would like to confirm it. Right? I just would like to see confirmation. It's the green and pink one. That's the only jacket I'm aware of. Didn't they find that bundled up and wrapped in a drawer, like tucked away somewhere on the first floor vacant bedroom? That's where that was found. Yeah, I think we all, if we're all going to make, if I claim that Brian Koberger was somewhere no one's heard of before, I'd like to be able to show you how I come to that understanding. Yeah, that jacket was found in the spare bedroom. I think something else was found in the spare bedroom too. Some type of fancy or light that was broken, but it was found in the first floor bedroom. But I think it came from a common area, if I'm not mistaken. There was also, I forget the name of the light. No, the bracelet. I'm aware of the bracelet, but I think that there was I forget what the fuck they were calling it. I know about the bracelet, but I think that there was a light. I don't know what the hell it starts with an S. A Sensi light, broken Sensi light. Yeah, a Sensi light. That's it, which he was. I think that was found broken inside that first floor bedroom that was unoccupied, right? Storage room. Yeah, the Sensi light. But I think there's images of that showed it from images of in the past of it being in the common area. Now this is I'm putting together things that I had seen, but it may not be, don't run with that and say the Sensi light was moved. I don't know that it was, but that Sensi light was brought up for a reason, and I think the reason, from what I remember, was that it was at one time it was in the common area, but that it was found in the first floor area, the bedroom, the unoccupied bedroom. Thanks, Nance. All right, well, I'm going to go think on how to cook this next steak of mine. I'm trying different ways of making steak just to see if my common way of making it is the best or not. And so far, it's still on top. Yep. All right, cool. Thanks for coming in. Everybody be good. Stay out of trouble. Do what you got to do.